Hello and welcome to a special episode here on the Plot Mom channel. I am joined today by the two most amazing people in my life, my wonderful parents, Sandy Oppenheimer and John Fisher. They have been artists for as long as I've been alive and quite a while before that. And they are absolutely my inspiration for being a author and being a creative person and the way I create. So without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and say a little bit about what they do, their art style, and who they are.
How'd you go?
I'm John Fisher, and I'm a sculptor, painter, illustrator, mostly figurative artist.
So that leaves me. I'm Sandy. I'm called wife of the sculptor Giovanni Pescatori. I'm called the mother of Allegra, but I'm also an artist, and I paint with paper. I was a painter. I found the joy of paper, and I began doing what I was doing painting-wise with paper. So I'm a collagist.
So I grew up with, obviously, your art all over. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I will make sure to post some links to your website and websites, and to so the audience who are not familiar with your work can see it. But I have a lot of questions because I feel like we've talked a lot about art, but there are things I still don't know. So what was the first piece of art that you distinctly remember making? And when and how did you decide that art would become a major part of your life?
The first piece that I still have is a picture of a bird in color crayon. I think I did in second grade. Something like that, but I used the entire sheet of the paper. There's no border at all. I used every inch of the paper, so it's a complete painting in a sense, with using color crayon, and it's got shading and composition and everything. And I remember recognizing it at that point, and that's why it got saved. This was significant.
Hey, I remember my first piece was a ballroom dance scene, and it was made out of cut felt. But it took
Interesting.
and I did it probably in the 5th grade, and it took me until I was 35 to get back to cutting and pasting. But it was really, I kept it, it went with me. Every apartment I lived in, I finally let it go, a number of decades ago. But, it took me that long to get back.
That's really, really interesting that you started with a similar medium that you ended up with.
But I don't remember a time when I didn't know that I was going to be an artist.
What about you?
I grew up in a family that, although we were introduced to art, I took art classes, and we went to the ballet, and we went to heard symphonies. Art was something other people did. It was a hobby. I was going to be a lawyer or a teacher or social something, but not an artist. Just didn't do that. And so it really wasn't until I, much later on in life, moved to Provincetown, Massachusetts, and met a whole bunch of women, older women, who were living a lifestyle that I really was excited about. And the running theme was they were all artists. And that really made
Some were writers.
well, yeah, right. Some kind of art, not just visual artists, but they were living the creative life, and it was exciting. We had it felt like, oh, that's the life I want.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I've watched you my whole life, doing art, and I feel like no matter what I considered doing with my life, art was always going to be a part of it. And, as growing up and being inspired by you and watching you work, and I've seen the struggles, but until recently they weren't really something that I had experienced for myself. Um, Now that I've started on that path, I'd love to know a little bit more about how you got there. Could you take us back to before art was your job? Like back to the first starting blocks of it, and how you made that transition.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, before I left home,
For you, I know that it was
because
the
as soon as I left home, it became a job. As soon as I left home, I needed to support myself. And so I started selling watercolors for $1 a piece and making illustrations that I turned into cards and sold them. And I went to Saturday markets, but before that, I was just a kid and I was just exploring things and traveling with my family and learning and being inspired.
So my journey was a little bit different because I didn't really come to art till way later. And I went to college. I even got a master's degree in children's theater. I performed in a children's theater company, and that was in my early 20s or mid 20s. And although I loved performing, I found that there were other things I wanted to do. And I realized pretty quickly that if I wanted to do theater, I had to do it, I had to give it my all. I had to do it 100% and give up everything else, because you do give up things for going down a certain path. And I wasn't ready. I wanted relationships, I wanted travel, I had wanderlust. And so I gave up theater. I left New York. I followed my love at the time, and we moved out to Denver. And I then had, in 4 years, 21 different jobs. And I soon learned things about working for other people. And I made a code for myself that I would never work for somebody who didn't treat me with respect. And that was the first thing. And, fairness and kindness. And so I had to quit a lot of jobs, which I found that my drama background worked really well. So I could write a book about my leaving jobs, which I
Give us one.
won. Um, so I was working in an Italian restaurant, and it was a really lovely Italian restaurant. Customers came, it was like a neighborhood place. I liked my coworkers, but the owner and the owner's wife, um, I don't know why they hired me, because I don't think they liked me very much, because every time I would go onto the floor, he would say something critical, and it was usually about how I looked, and not how I worked, but how I looked. And I'd usually just, you know, swallowed it and went out and did my job and left it behind. But one night, it was just one too many times. Now his wife, who he called Baby Cakes, um, was on the cash register, which is the only place she would be. She would never lift a finger to help us bus a table or anything, even if there was a rush going on, a line out the door. And he said something. I had it. I should tell you that we had to wear these little black French lacy aprons. And I said to the other waitresses, I'm really sorry for doing this in the middle of a rush, but I got to. And I untied my apron and went like this to the cash register. And I said, Baby Cakes, you're on. And I gave it to her and I walked out. And I was I said, oh, thank you for that theater, because, and that was for them. So they all ended quite dramatically. And, anyways, and I learned that, maybe I was a kind of person that should find something I could do by myself, that I could work for myself, because I really knew I was a hard worker, but I just couldn't take the abuse.
Yeah.
You know,
You don't obey orders.
you know, I'm not very different. I'm not very obedient. I just said I'm
She
willing
was
to
told
do.
once that she wasn't being paid to think.
Yeah, yeah. I just so that it was a good experience having all those jobs.
Absolutely. I think that it is important for creative people to know what it means to work in someone else's business, if nothing else, just to get an idea of what hard work is. I have taken, I think, a great deal of what I've learned working in the restaurant industry and working in other places as the foundation stones of what running a business entails. So
And
what
needs hard work.
And
yes.
Everything. I mean, everything. No matter how you want to, what you want to be accomplished, you need to work hard at it.
Absolutely. So what happened afterwards when you did find yourself as full-time artists? What were those first early years like?
that's how I would wake up.
Oh, good. I'm not having a heart condition. That's normal. Great.
And almost every night I'd wake up and say, we have no money. We have a child. We're in a foreign country. You know, and John would calm me down, and then I would get to my studio and everything would be okay. As long as I was working, that was sort of became my anchor. I felt like, well, first of all, kept me in the moment. I saw myself producing, so it was kind of like making mana, or that there was something there at the end of the day, and it got me through. Eh, you know,
We all. I mean, I went and lived in the tree for 2 years.
Do tell us that. The audience does not know this story as much as I do. Where did you live, and how did you live for 2 years?
Well, I lived in Pennsylvania, but that doesn't. Yeah, I lived in a lot of different places, but Pennsylvania for the longest stretch. But the reason I went to live in the trees is because I wanted to learn my craft, and I couldn't see a way to learn craft and pay rent at the same time. That was the big problem. That the coming up with the rent was the problem, and
So,
so I
for
avoided the rent issue.
For those who are not familiar with this particular story, he wove himself a net, strung it between a whole bunch of trees up high in the canopy like a trampoline, and lived on it for 2 years. It was when you guys were starting.
oh,
Long before I
John,
met Sandy,
but then when we hooked together, I lived up in the trees. I must say that it was a really big hit with my mother.
But it's a wonderful, wonderful place to sleep, and it was free, and it allowed me to concentrate on my craft, and I've always been able to sell my watercolors and drawings. I could eat. I can buy enough to eat. Eating wasn't the problem. It was paying the rent.
I think what I've learned most about the artistic living the life of an artist, and what I learned the most at the beginning years was, besides working hard, which is a must, it's no guarantee, but it's a must. At least it provides you with the possibility of making a living. The other thing was to live simply and prioritize, just don't live beyond your means.
Right.
Simplicity. And I think we're all learning that now in this pandemic. Really, what do we need to live a good life? And when you buy into that whole consumer culture, um it can be very expensive. And
Yes.
it doesn't make you happy. It may make you more comfortable, but it doesn't, it's
Are there any things that you sacrificed in those early years that you regret?
No,
um
I don't think so.
Well, there was a time when we were living so rough that I felt that it was really challenging to my psychic and my physical health. You know, we had no running water. There was drips in the ceiling. There were, you know,
Scorpions.
you know, you know, there were windows with no glass on the window.
Inconveniences.
It got to the point when I just said, not for love, not for art, not for nothing. I'm out of here because I didn't feel well. And
And I
I think
begged you.
you have to, yeah, you did. You have to, you know, I mean, art has to take the front seat, but you always have to care for your soul, for your body, for your mind, for your, you know, emotional state. You have to tend
But by
everything.
the same token, we have walked the edge. I mean, we have gotten down to practically nothing, and at the last moment, something has happened. Someone's come through. We've made a sale, and we've gotten through that crisis. And then someone does something really wonderful to us, and so it is a roller coaster, but it is a great ride.
And now it's happened enough times
that we're
pretty confident that we're going to get through.
Yeah.
I think it truly is a life of faith.
That's it.
Without getting religious, without you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe that the universe or whatever will provide, and you have to just carry on like it's all going to be okay. And when you need to, you take an odd job, or you don't have to suffer.
Right.
You know, life provides you with enough things to worry about and to suffer. You don't have to make that your goal as an artist.
The goal is not to be a starving artist.
Right.
You might be a starving artist for a while in the goal of doing art and eventually being comfortable while doing art.
Right, but let's talk about practical things, So, people want to earn a living. They want to earn what, 15? I want to earn, say, $20 an hour, right? So if I can produce a piece of art that's good in an hour, and I can sell it for $20, I can usually convince someone to give me their $20 bill for that piece of artwork.
We've always had something at every price range for sale. So we had the $20 product, we had the $20,000 product. So,
and the $200 product, and the $2,000 product. It's like, to everybody who walked into our life, there was some way that they could help us if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And in return, get a beautiful piece of artwork. And it was a fair trade. And you can't discount how many friends help you in your lifetime.
Absolutely.
It doesn't underestimate your worth, your value.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I remember the first time I sold a piece to someone who didn't know me, and it was like, oh my God.
Yes. The first time I got a random review on one of my books, I was just like, wait, someone who I don't know read my book? I'm gonna hide now.
It's a really feeling that you touch somebody,
Yeah.
other than the people you usually touch anyways, because you share a friendship.
Speaking of people that you know and people who are part of your life, what artists and other people have inspired your journeys?
A ton of artists from the past, but in my lifetime, I had three major artists. Mrs. Sargent, when I was 13, took me out in Paris, sat me on the sidewalks and painted and drew with me. And she taught me perspective and courage and what being a living artist was all about, by example and everything else. Then Mrs. Peterson in high school, who was hard on me, but encouraged me, gave me all the clay I could ever use, and allowed me to do life-size sculptures in high school. and then Tom Blodgett in my mid to late 20s that really taught me a new way of seeing and a new way of creating that has stayed with me for the rest of my life.
For me, certainly many, many artists from the past, Modigliani and Matisse and Alice Neal to Jacob Lawrence. I could go on and on and on. There's been so many and continue to be so many. And now with the internet, you can see from every continent wonderful, wonderful artists that are creating today. I would have to say John, thank you, was a very big inspiration to me. Not only what he was doing, but when I met him and we started talking, and he was in the back of a big catering truck, like a box truck, which was his studio on wheels. He had a piece of marble there and a compressor and a forge and all that. And no matter what time I got up, and I'm an early riser, he was parked outside the art center where I was living. He was there working, and we have lots of conversations. And after a while, I started thinking, he's pretty smart, but so am I. And I thought, and he's pretty creative. I said, but so am I. And I said, the only difference is that he's doing it. And he's doing it every day with all his heart and all his passion. And I realized that's what it took. It's giving yourself permission to do it, and taking the risk of doing it, and being courageous, facing yourself and that empty piece of paper every day, that I could do it. It's just, I truly believe that anybody can be an artist or a writer, or maybe a dancer. You have to start early, or a musician, you may have to start early, but certainly writing and visual arts, you can start at any age. You have a lifetime to draw images from, but it's doing the work. It's really just showing up and doing it with great intention and great attention, and making it an important part of your life, making it your life,
Yeah.
from your life.
Do you think that being a working artist has changed your relationship with art and your medium? That would you have developed differently if you had another source of income, or if you didn't depend on your art for your livelihood?
We've been told that to not underestimate our
Early poverty.
our poverty. That, I mean, it's not to glorify poverty at all, but the fact that we've struggled has kept us struggling, fighting, and focused. Right. I mean, having you meant that I went from having 7 days a week to make a living to having 3.5 days a week to make a living, so
Well, I think
it's just like suddenly you change. You have to change. You have to accommodate, and you have to grow and expand, and that's the challenge. I mean, that's what it's all about. In some level, is to also, isn't this fun?
I don't think it's changed my way of working or my expression. I think what it's done is I'd probably take more commissions than I would if I didn't need to make a living. I think about size more, but I never think about, well, what will the public buy, want or buy, because I think that's sends you down a rabbit hole that's pretty dangerous, because first of all, it always changes. I think you have to stay true to your own voice.
I have a pretty big wish list of, things. If I was wealthy, I could certainly find ways to improve my situation, but hasn't me from doing anything.
Yeah, there's a constant talk. Here we mostly talk about writing, and there's a big debate in the indie writing community, especially about whether you should be writing passion projects or whether you should be writing to market, specifically creating for the intent of being able to sell it. Do you feel like that has affected your mediums?
I've chosen to take on jobs, small jobs, rather than um, play to the market for myself. I've always figured out a way, fortunately, to have more days in the studio than less days in the studio. I always was able to keep that balance. Um, but for me, no, I don't think
And for
it's
me,
changed.
I think that there's always been and will always be a market for the work that I do. The market has existed there forever, but there's so few people left on the earth that can fill that market, and the most of the market is now in museums, and so I figure it's even got to be more of a market out there in the world for the few pieces left for sale.
We do have a question from the audience, which is, what's your favorite project you've worked on?
Hmm. I just recently, I think probably my favorite project is always the one I'm working on because I'm in the moment and it's something new and, it's fresh and a new possibility. I recently did two large pieces for the new Children's Hospital at Stanford, and I was just thrilled to think of artwork in a children's hospital. And I had they gave me a broad theme, which was basically they wanted it uplifting and multicultural and children doing something. And and so in those parameters, I felt no limitation, you know, and they also told me the size. And that was really, really fun. It was fun to work big and it was fun to do something uplifting and colorful and I changed my palette quite a bit and I really had fun doing that. And my women's series, which is an ongoing series that I've been working for decades on, which is honoring notable women.
What about you?
I've been thinking on one level, there's some favorite projects, favorite sculptures that have come out because of the way I work spontaneously. I have no idea previously. The birthing process has sometimes moved me to tears. Um, and but the most fun maybe was some of my collaborative projects. Uh, Having that some other brain, some other entity delving into that creative process opens up so many new.
It certainly inspired me. It's why I do most of my creative work, because I got to see the creative energy that was happening at the studio where you were working when I was growing up, like in our dining room every night of my childhood, and seeing that exchange of creative energy was fantastic. And speaking of that, I kind of want to talk a little bit about your process. Like, what does creativity look for you? Is it a thing where you start at the same time every day and work to a certain time? Do you work when the muse takes you? How do you work?
Discipline. We're very both disciplined. I'm in the studio almost the same time every day, and it's 7 days a week. You know, but then I have my own process that I use to work, and that's another story.
You can tell a little
Yeah,
bit.
please.
Yeah.
My process is that I I believe that the act of creation is one of desperation, and that if you're creating something that you're comfortable with, then you're just recreating something that you're comfortable with. And it's only when you're really going out on a limb and really taking chances and in risks that that the exciting stuff happens. And so you have you have to put yourself in a desperate situation. And part of that could be economic. That's sort of always there looming over you. But the other, you want to be in a creative, desperate situation. And so I start by taking a very expensive stone and dumping 30% of it on the ground with no concept of what I'm doing, you know, and that makes me crazy. It's just like, what do you mean? I might need that piece. That's a good, that was, what do you mean? It's gone forever. I can't put it back. And so, I just get more and more desperate. But as that affects my adrenaline, it pushes me to new visions that I never could have had I not taken those risks earlier on. And so I feel like I can't get to the places I need to go unless I pass through the doors of hell.
Hey. Paradise. No, I work every day unless I have to tend to other things.
You do have to do stuff.
I mean, you have to take care of your life, and the other aspects of yourself. Um, I have a very vigorous, routine. I walk every day, which puts me, kind of clears my head. And I'm usually, if I'm thinking about anything, I try not to think, but if I'm thinking about anything, it's usually about what I'm going to be doing in the studio because I left it yesterday and I have things I want to, change and move on. So I think that's part of the thing. The more you're in your studio working, uh, you're ready. You're ready for the music. You don't have to like get in the zone. You're in the zone. So it's practice. It's just, practicing. When I start a piece, I mean, sitting, standing in front of a blank piece of watercolor paper is both exciting because, by the end of the day, there's going to be something on there. By the end of a few weeks, there's going to be a whole world. But if I'm working from life, if I'm doing a portrait or still life, I'll do a loose sketch and then I pick out a loose palette and then I just go and I just put down big abstract shapes. And then each pass gets more and more and more and more detail till the final pass, which is probably like your final edit. I take away everything that's embellishment that doesn't need to be there and try to just simplify and keep the essence. So
macro to micro. That's always how
I think it's really the same process, whether you're writing or you're painting.
I think it's the same process for all art. Even if you're choreographing a dance move, you don't choreograph the little tiny things until you have the broad movements. Music, same. You come up with the structure first, and I think people get lost in the minute.
Well, yeah, because we want to make something beautiful, but it is the structure. That's the composition, whether it's the composition of the music, whether it's the storyline, whether it's the composition of the painting or the sculpture. That's key.
So you talked a little bit about, being in the studio mindset. So when you are making your living as an artist, you need to be able to create art consistently. That's the goal. How do you drum up inspiration? Is it something that comes naturally to you, or do you believe that inspiration is something that can be created through practice, or do you feel like it's something out in the universe that like attaches itself to you?
Well, I think the inspiration comes in the doing. Not that it doesn't come from other places, but I mean, we're both very fortunate that we're highly inspired people. Cezanne said, "Turn 5 degrees and you have your next painting." You don't have to look too far. I've been, going to coming home from a potluck when we were still able to have potlucks, and some lemons on the plate that I brought my dish, my food on. And it was like, oh my God, that's so beautiful, and I had to go home and do a collage of those 2 lemons on that plate because it insisted, it was just so moved me so much. So I think I find my inspiration in just the life I lead. I'm fortunate. I live a very fortunate life. I can find it in music. I can find it in a book. I can find it in a conversation with somebody or a meal that's presented. But I think if you're not inspired, you just got to put that first line down, that first word down, or give yourself a prompt, or take a break. You might just be needing a break and take a walk in nature. Get to the ocean if you're nearby, and care for your soul. I think there's a difference between taking repose because your soul and your body needs it or your mind needs it, and resisting work. And you'll know the difference. If it's fear, if it's just fear, that's going to feel really different than exhaustion from creating.
Yes.
And you have to honor both, but don't play into the fear. Fight that fear. As AOC just said, use your fear,
embrace it,
and
whatever.
Fuel it. Use it as fuel.
Yeah.
The creative act is an act of desperation.
Right.
But if your body and your mind and your soul is just saying, "Oh, I am so tired," take a rest. There, 1 or 10,000 less words, 5 less collages in your lifetime, doesn't matter. What matters is that you're caring for your soul so you can continue to work.
For me, I very much look at it as if I'm not having fun when I'm writing, if I am not enjoying the process, something is wrong. It might be the place I'm writing, it might be the music I'm listening to, I might be tired, I might have made a mistake and not realize it, but the moment it feels like I'm wading through molasses just to get that next word in the page is the time when I need to re-examine something, because I think it builds bad habits. If you hate what you're doing, if you aren't having fun while you're doing it, then you're going to associate not having fun with your art.
Well, I feel like if my mind's getting distracted and I'm thinking about something else, then I'm just going to screw something up. I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Allegra. For me, it's a very joyous process, and that's why I often wonder, why isn't everybody doing this? It brings me so much joy, and I think you just have to pay attention. That's it. You pay attention to how you're feeling and what you're doing.
So, what out? I mean, you've talked a little bit about just the world outside, but are there activities and other things you do that you think deeply impact your art?
Travel.
For me, it's travel.
Yeah, travel definitely
Eating.
One. Reading, it can take you to a whole new world. It can help you travel when you can't travel. Music, music moves me like nothing else. Walking in nature. Dancing. I dance madly daily. And cooking, I think probably for you.
Yes, definitely for me.
For me, yeah, meeting with friends, having a good conversation with a friend. I mean, anything that makes you feel more alive than dead is a good thing for the artistic process.
I mean, we're lucky that we have so much time to just be in the world. The upside of all the struggle is that you can just sit and enjoy the time, or the sunlight on a tree, or whatever. That there's nobody's asking you to be anywhere or do anything, or
yeah. I do feel like there is a part of being creative which is an allowance to pay attention to the details around you. Whether it's finding something to paint or looking at someone very carefully to figure out how you would describe them in writing. I do think that creating art is a grounding exercise because you have to pay attention to the world around you.
It's like all of a sudden everything went in multicolor. As soon as you start seeing the world, I think it puts you in the moment is what it is. We're all so future oriented or past, rehashing everything. And when you're creating, you're right there. You know, when you're really present, really observing, you know, you're in the moment, and that moment to moment adds for a very beautiful life.
On the flip side, it also can be very difficult, and that kind of leads into my next question is was there a moment when you doubted it? Was there a moment when you almost gave up or it just became too much?
I think that's the dilemma of being an artist. There's always self-doubt. I think, you know, making a living from an artist is a huge challenge and a huge balancing act. I don't think there's one way to do it. I think every artist has to find their way to be able to create and be able to fulfill their needs in their own way, whatever is comfortable. You know, I don't think jumping off the cliff and doing it full time all the time is for everyone. It might cause too much stress for someone. But I think the daily practice, if you could just find 20 minutes a day to write, if you're a writer, or an hour a day to paint, just so you get a daily discipline so you are always ready for the muse when she arrives.
Hmm.
And what about you?
Not in
Did
this,
you ever?
it won't come. It
Yeah.
happen if you're not doing it. That's the thing, you know. It's like if you're not ready for it, you can't be ready for it. You can't grab a
Yeah.
ring
You
and
can't make art if you're not ready to make art. You can't write if you're not sitting down at the computer. That's why I'd much rather sit down at the computer and just type, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no clue what I'm writing today, than write nothing, because at least it's opening myself up to the possibility of
Well,
writing.
writing, I took a writing class once, and the teacher said, go to your place that you write, the same place every day, and sit there for an hour, even if you have nothing to say. And she said, it's going to be easier to start writing than to just sit there for an hour. And that was, you
Yeah.
I mean, that's the same in the studio. You'll start puttering, you know, you know, if I ever get stuck, you can just, you know, take a cutting from a magazine, put it on a piece of paper, and start from there. You know, okay, so you put a dog's head, and now you can draw a little body on it, or put it on a couch. You know,
or
you
you
just,
start another piece,
or
you
some
know.
people spill some coffee on a piece of paper, and then all of a sudden there's a doodle that you can work from, and so there's no, you know,
I mean,
I
yeah.
think we all come into this world so creative. If you've been around children, you've been a child, and if you're around children, you see they have no self-consciousness. You give them rocks, they're going to arrange them in a beautiful way, you know, or an interesting pattern. And we just have to get back. That's the key, is to get back to that playfulness, that joy of being, that that delight of being alive.
It's definitely the way. I mean, I do think that there is a place for negative feelings in art. I do think that there's definitely another side of that, but it all comes back to the actual act of creation is an act of catharsis.
I
It's
want
an act.
express those negative feelings or
Mhm.
sadnesses or whatnot through your art and get them out, or you know, deal with them. But even doing that sometimes is a relief and a joyful experience. And
One of the first questions you asked, I think, was about when did you know that art was going to be
Yeah.
part of your life? When we first got to Italy, and I knew nobody but John, and we were living up in this little cottage on a hillside. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have a car. John's studio was off the property, and I was by myself, and that was before internet and computers, and I got two letters delivered from two different friends telling me that a friend of ours had ended her life. And I was devastated, and I had no one to talk to. So I said, what am I going to do? I could go crazy here. So I went into the studio and I started working, and this piece was born. It was called Janet Ascending, and it was Janet kind of flying up. And I knew very little about art at the time, but I had this deep feeling, and I put it on paper, and there are these birds flying with her. and it 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 gave me solace when I needed it. And not that I use my art as therapy, but it took a very painful feeling, and I saw the transformational power of art, that you could take something so sad for me at the time and make it something beautiful. And you think of, the writings of Toni Morrison, for example. She's dealing with real issues, and yet they're beautiful. They're beautiful pieces of fiction. So that's another thing art does. So I think that it's room for everything. I mean, if for every feeling you
But
have.
I've never doubted my path. I've never doubted the overall decision to be an artist.
I have not. I have, because there's so much ill in the world, and there's so much that needs to be done. And I thought, I could be spending my energy doing something else. And then I realized, no, the world needs beauty as well. The world needs artists. Imagine a world without artists. How, I mean,
Horrific.
so
We're leaving important stuff, I think.
well, we're leaving evidence of living a life, if nothing else,
Yeah.
and, and hopefully we inspire some people along the way, and maybe inspire others to follow their heart and create. And
I, I remember a moment and during one of your on-site carvings, Dad, where there was a woman who came by and said, I've always wanted to do art. If I remember correctly, you said, well, why aren't you? Or something, paraphrasing, but
I mean, sometimes can be a little gruff.
well, no, but I think it does boil down to that, is if you feel that inspiration to create, giving yourself permission to say, this is valid, this is something that I can do, and oftentimes the only thing that's standing in our way is ourselves.
absolutely.
Right.
I teach workshops now and again, and I can tell you that every workshop, there's at least one, and usually a few, of people who walk in and say, I'm not an artist, I can't draw. And I said, no, but you've taken this workshop and you're not an artist yet. But if you want to be one, you can be one. You just have to put in the time.
Just have to do it. The difference between someone who doesn't do art and someone who does is doing art.
Every of us has something special and unique inside. I mean, we're all of the same human race, but we all have our own heart and our own soul and our own song. And
I've
sing it.
seen too many examples of people who no experience, none whatsoever, and yet produce amazing pieces of art. If if given the chance, if
Oh, I remember my first class that I taught for writing, and I was doing NaNoWriMo. I'm going to be doing it again this year with a small class. And I had a whole bunch of high school students who had never really significantly written. And one of them wrote this story, and it was a little novella, and it was just some of the most, to this day, most beautiful, eloquent, elegant writing that I have ever encountered. I don't know that she's ever written anything else. She may have, and we've lost touch, but it was incredible to see. It was humbling because I had at that point written several novels, and I think that it is both like really scary to see that, to think of the struggle that you have in trying to achieve something that someone else might get right away, and then to remember that we all actually have that. We all have that medium, that thing, that passion that will come out. Sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes a moment, sometimes it takes a lifetime, but it's all the process. Like that's the fun part.
As photographer once said to me when it was not digital, we're dating ourselves. Pre-computer, he said 1 in 36, because there was 36 pictures to a roll of film. And he said, if I get one good one, I think I'm golden. most of the stuff is just practice. And once in a while you hit something and it resonates with humanity.
I think it's more like 1 in 100 for me.
Yeah, whatever. It's
Speaking of that, do you have any advice on giving and taking critique?
Yes.
Yes.
Take it. But it does not.
No, good critique gives the answer.
It gives the answer. It doesn't just say that's a piece of crap. It gives you it tells you why it's not working and how to improve it.
Fix it.
So if you know somebody whose work you respect and whose opinion you respect, take it, but be ready. Do it when you're ready for it. Because there was in the early years, I remember John would sometimes come into my studio and start critiquing something, and I wasn't ready. I was too raw. Didn't have enough distance from it yet, and sometimes it just stopped me. So wait and ask when you're ready.
I remember watching you two critique each other's work my entire childhood, and I remember being very confused as to why someone could say something that was not nice about it and yet have the other person say thank you. Like, thank you, this is really good advice. And I think it really drummed home from an early age that critique isn't a character judgment.
No.
Critique is about the work and about improving it. It is a helpful hand up to see something that you aren't seeing in your own work.
Which leads to the collaborative work again.
Yes.
Because that's, in a sense, what's happening is that I'm writing over something because at that particular moment, it needs to be written over and or sculpted over or whatever. And I mean, I guess with digital, you can still get back to something, but with stone, you can't. So when I started working collaboratively and I was going to redo something, it was redone, but it was my edit. It was my critique.
Yeah, how has the collaborative and being in a community of artists shaped your art? Because that was our lives for most of my childhood and a big portion of your lives.
It was a dream. I mean, we miss it to this day to have our buddies working together and looking at our work and giving critique and encouraging each other, and also just having other people who worked as hard as we worked. It was like everybody that was there was devoted and dedicated to their craft, and that was really inspiring. It was a wonderful, wonderful time.
To give some context to those who do not know us, we lived in a small town called Pietrasanta on the coast of northern Tuscany, and in the 90s, but continuing on to this day, there is a fairly thriving community of mostly marble carvers, but many other mediums who've all kind of made a pilgrimage to Italy to where the material is readily available to work. And I think that my own process for creating was absolutely intrinsically inspired by that creative environment.
A work ethic, you get up in the morning, you go to work. Only you're going to work, oftentimes in a room full of people who are all making their own work. And if somebody needs a hand, you're right there to help them. And if not, you can walk by and see what they're doing occasionally, but just keep your nose to your grindstone and enjoy a meal together at lunch and get back to work and maybe a glass of wine in the evening.
And for being one of the few non-sculptors of the area, I had the good fortune of being around 3D people, because here I was, a 2D artist trying to put 3D on the page, and so it helped me understand volume a little more, and so I really appreciated that. I learned a lot.
Yeah, it was for me the best part of collaborative work is that like those struggles, those moments of doubt, you can turn around and say, "Can you pick it up for a second while I take a breath? Can you take that step that I'm not brave enough to take? Or can you push me further than I would have gone
Mm-hmm.
by myself?" And I do think that it creates this kind of higher energy environment that is really exciting, because when you're alone in front of a blank canvas or a blank page, it can be really daunting.
It
Well,
is.
the people that I've worked with, one of the things I liked about them was they had different skills than I did, right? And so it's like they were really good finish carvers. So if I'll leave them the last pass because they do it better than I do.
Yeah.
Uh,
So here's my kind of one of my final questions. And if anyone in the audience is interested in learning more, we'll absolutely take some audience questions. But if you had a new artist, whatever medium, sit down with you to dinner, what would the advice be? They say, "I want to do art."
I would say, well, then do it. And I would say, I would tell them to remain patient, because it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years and years and years. I would uh, encourage them to be courageous. I would encourage them to educate themselves, look at art, look at great art and see what it is that you love about it. Why does it move you? Try to analyze what it is. Um, I would tell them to not give up, to have faith, that it's not always going to be easy. In fact, it's not going to be easy for a long time, probably.
I'm feeling that now.
Okay.
the Italians say, you have to have passion, patience, and courage. And I've always added to that, you have to have vision.
There's one other thing I would tell them, that is learn good time management. Let go of the things that don't matter. I mean, no, don't live in squalor. Don't get me wrong, but I had heard this wonderful, wonderful speech by this person who was leaving it for his children. He was diagnosed with a disease that was going to take him out, and I thought he was going to talk about the Great Spirit or the creative process, something. He spoke about time management, and his suggestion was make 3 lists. First list is things that must get done today. Next list is things that must get done in the next couple weeks. And the third one is things that I got to do before I die, like, the lifetime. Get rid of the third one right away, because that stuff probably isn't going to happen. Focus in on that first list, and what he was saying was, manage your time in such a way that you have time for the things that matter. And
Good advice.
for me, that's certainly creating and being with people I love, and eating well, and communing with nature.
So, if you have anything else to say on that matter, Dad, I don't know if you kind of said your part.
I
Yeah.
pretty much,
Yeah. We do have a question from the audience, which is, how did you get other people to start noticing your art?
we're still trying.
That's why you're here.
Story. We lived on that same mountainside where we were without phone. Well, we had our first Thanksgiving there. We invited a bunch of strays around and had Thanksgiving up there. And one was this Russian woman who was about 10 years older than us. Another was this American sculptor who was also about 10 or 15 years older than us. And it was myself and John and a couple other young artists. And before the meal was even on the table, they start passing out these glossy brochures on their work. And I'm thinking, honey, you are singing to the wrong choir. We are not buyers. We are,
having Thanksgiving.
we're having Thanksgiving. You're poor. And she said to me, you must tell people what you do, because you never know who's sitting there. And so you have to promote yourself in some way. So the first part was just really, first of all, doing the work, and then starting to slowly exhibit, but not a lot. And I was in no hurry to exhibit. I wanted to wait until I had something I thought was worth exhibiting.
I mean, we did these public carvings.
We did public carvings. Now we do, Facebook and Instagram and those
teach,
time of thing, and we teach, and that's a good way to get people to know what you do.
Basically, you got to get out of the house and travel.
That same Russian woman said to me, you could be the next Matisse and he could be the next Michelangelo, and you're going to starve to death if you stay up on this mountaintop. And we almost did. So you do have to just let people know and take opportunities when they come.
Mm-hmm.
Just take opportunities.
Yes.
And work, produce a lot. Picasso said, make so much work that is coming out your door that they can't help but take notice.
Right.
There is something to be said about volume. It's something that I've always felt with writing is I have much better chance of being noticed if I publish 10 books than if I publish one book.
I hope you'll feel the same when we die and you have all our stuff to do.
I have lists and lists of plans to what to do with your stuff when that happens. Don't worry. We are already on it. It's going to be a full-time job. I accept it. Keep on making. So I have one last question for you. And it's something that I encounter a lot while I'm working with young artists in particular. They say, but I have writer's block, but I want to create and I can't. What do you tell those people? The people who are stuck in a rut, the people who are grinding their wheels and not actually, and feel like the block is internal?
Well, again, I think it's process orientated, then you got to go back to playing somehow. Leonardo da Vinci said throw sponges of paint against the wall, or you start doing word games. You say everything that has to do with water, splash, liquid. How many words can you come up that have to do with water? And you find out there's 40, 50, 60 words that have to do with water. Flood, rain.
Yeah, arrange them in some way.
And then, so playing games. There's got to be something that to get you started, and then allow the process to carry you forward.
Yeah, and change the narrative in your head too. I mean, that's and for me as a visual artist, I would do something randomly that I could
buy some beautiful papers.
Yeah, I'd buy some, or cut out pieces of paper and start, playing with them, or take a string and dip it into some paint and swirl it, and play. Yeah. It doesn't have to be important or profound or
good.
Or good. Yeah, let yourself make mistakes. That's so important.
What was the name of play?
The free play or something.
Free play.
It's called, I think it was called Free Playing or Free Play.
No, Free Play.
It was the improvisation of art, of creating. And I think that's it. We sometimes take it all way. It is serious. We need to be serious about it. You have to have intention and pay attention and all
and
that.
Discipline and all that
stuff. But you also have to allow yourself to play. We are all grown-ups, and that's dull. We have to be mature and do adult things.
And part of the play is also taking risks, and
And not critiquing
and
yourself in the early
and
stages.
and to learn to take risks at something safe like play is a good place to learn to take risks.
I'll tell you,
You're just playing, you know. So
I heard this. I went on this webinar about collage as used in art therapy, and all these different therapists said that collage, because it is such a playful medium and it is such a forgiving medium, and it's something that we all have done since early on, tearing and cutting and pasting, and that so that's a good way to start, even for a writer. Cut out some words and collage them on a piece of paper, rearrange them. Or were you at our Thanksgiving when Ahu, this one of the guests, said, "Okay, everybody put in a word about," I think it was leaves.
Yes, it was
And
leaves.
and there were about 20 people, and everybody put in a word, and then she took those words and she made a poem out of it, and it was beautiful.
mm-hmm.
And it spoke of leaves. So that's what I would suggest.
Do you remember the game that we played with the pieces from the quarry?
I think so, yes. Vaguely.
We put down a piece of steel from the quarry, and then we would arrange them on the table, and everybody would arrange it, and it would, every time it would be beautiful. You know, but I was marveling always that how is it that everybody can succeed at this game every time? How can you win every single time?
I think it comes down to something that I discovered through travel, this notion of you cannot get lost if you don't know where you're going.
Right.
Yeah.
It is impossible to get it wrong if you don't have the preconceived notion in your head of what it should look like at the end.
And that's why I think it's really good to start, at least visually, as an artist, without a preconceived notion, because that preconceived notion locks you out of so many potential possibilities.
Back to your friend who has the block, or as the person has, if it's a writer, read some really good literature. Read something that has lasted through time. That's considered great literature. If you're visual,
go to the museum.
Yeah, go to a museum, virtual museum, and see something beautiful.
Inspirational. Well, thank you so very much for coming on here. There is a quote I'd like to kind of end on before I let you tell everyone how to find you and how to support you and how to follow you. And I think it boils down a lot of what we've talked about over the course of my entire life. It's from Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and it's "Overcome fear, behold wonder."
Wonderful. Wonderful.
That's always been, I think, boiled down what I think I learned from you.
Well, I'm glad you were listening and paying attention. And I want to also say, really, my favorite project has really been raising you. So, anyways, I love you. Thank you all for listening, and thanks for having us. It's been
and yes, and just before we go, where can people find you? How can they follow you?
On Facebook and other things, I'm social media. I'm Giovanni Pescatori. And my website is johnfishersculpture.com.
And I am Sandy Oppenheimer collage.com. I can also be followed as that on Facebook and Instagram.
They post amazing art. Everyone who is not following them should. I know I'm biased, but their art is absolutely beautiful. And it covers almost every wall of my home.
Second stimulus check.
Yes. If you are new to this channel and are just tuning in, like, subscribe, and follow us for lots of new material. It really helps us get seen. It helps us shed light on all these wonderful people who come on here and what we're doing. And if you are a creative person who wants to join these kind of conversations, the Plot Mom channel has a Discord server where we talk art, mostly writing, but all kind of creative things, and we do a lot of fun stuff. So, without ado, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all to the audience who came and asked questions. Have a wonderful, wonderful